I've got to start on the fires, though. The fires and climate change. First things first. These fires are terrible. They've taken lives. They've ruined lives as well. There's plenty more and worse could come in coming months around the country. We have great sympathy for everybody who's been affected, and like you, I have nothing but gratitude and praise for the men and women working hard as we speak to control blazes and protect people. I've done some of that work in the past. I don't speak from ignorance here. As a professional fire spotter, I was involved in the mop-up patrols and flare-ups of the Ash Wednesday fires that killed more than 70 people in South Australia and Victoria in 1983. So I've had a look at these issues and I've worked at it. But bushfires are always bad. And it's in the worst conditions in this country, they can be brutal, of course, and unstoppable. Yet this is the point. What we're seeing now is part of an annual threat, an ever-present threat in this country that's part of our lives in Australia. Yes, we are in a bad drought, so areas of New South Wales that are normally damp are dry. Yes, this is already one of the worst bushfire seasons in that one state. But the injection of the hysterical politics of climate change into the coverage of these fires has seen facts, history and context thrown right out the window in favour of trying to use these fires to push a political barrow, a climate alarmist barrow and a lot of sensationalism. It's pretty sickening, and it insults everybody's intelligence. Now, if you're into science and facts, you have to accept that the nation's most preeminent experts say there's no direct link between this drought and climate change. There's no long-term drying trend. And if you accept facts and science and history, you have to study the record and see that this nation, this state, has seen similar conditions and similar disasters many, many times over. And most importantly, if you know anything about the climate science and the reality of what's unfolding across the world, you know there's nothing Australia has done or could have done that would have altered our climate in the here and now, and there's nothing that Australia can or ever will do that will change the global climate. And even if the entire planet turned carbon neutral tomorrow, we would still have summers like this, we would still have fires like this. Those are just the facts of the nation and the climate that we live in. And that's why it insults victims, past, present and future, to make wildly exaggerated claims about what's happening now. That's why we ought to keep calm and deal with the fires and protection and prevention and arsonists and planning and fuel reduction burns. You know, all the things that we can control. Anyway, to show you how silly the debate has become, have a look at this. Here's commentator and ABC favourite Jane Caro on Twitter talking about the smoke haze in Sydney and wondering why we're not marching in the streets. Now, this stuff is nuts. Yes, the smoke haze was bad, but there are fires and this is what happens. I've shown you before how in 1936 a ship got lost in the smoke haze off Sydney Harbour and foghorns had to be used to try and locate it when the smoke haze was so thick the harbour master couldn't see across the heads. And in 1951 the smoke haze from bushfires around Sydney was so bad that all the airports had to be closed, from Mascot through to Bankstown and all the way out to Richmond. Too much smoke and they couldn't see to land aircraft. Context matters, history matters. But Caro also had a go the other day at Labor Resources spokesman Joel Fitzgibbon because he supports the coal industry. She said she was in his electorate in the Hunter Valley near Barrington Tops, claimed to be looking at rainforest that was now dry, with fires and dust in either direction and no feed for the stock, yet Fitzgibbon was still spruiking coal. Caro said words failed her and she had no respectable words for the Labor MP. Fitzgibbon came back with some facts and some sense, saying he'd voted for all the carbon-cutting bills that had gone to Parliament, but noting that even if Labor's carbon tax had been in place for the previous 6 years, would still be experiencing the same bushfires. And he said the big emitter nations around the world need our resources to transition. A fair point if you understand the need for power in an economy and you've ever seen what a wind turbine or a solar panel are made out of. But here's the kicker. This response from Jane Caro gives the game away. It is all these climate catastrophists have left when they are confronted with facts. Yes, she says, but at least we would feel like we were doing something. Feelings. Feel like we were doing something. She goes on to say we are reaping a whirlwind, which is not true, and that we are doing nothing, which is also not true. And then she goes on to say we have to get rid of coal to save our grandchildren, the usual emotive stuff. But feelings. Caro said we should take expensive climate action because it would make her and her mates feel like they were doing something. That's this debate in a nutshell. They spruik fear and catastrophe without reference to the facts, and they want people in coal mines, power stations, factories and elsewhere to lose their jobs and the rest of us to pay more for our power so they can sit back in their lovely homes and feel like they are doing something. Just feel like they were doing something. And all the while, none of this, of course, would make any difference one way or the other to the climate. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a feel-pinion. And this is the sort of silliness we are being fed. It's dangerous and it actually makes me feel just a little bit nauseous.